Tonight, tensions simmer in East Asia as Japan moves to calm a rapidly escalating row with China over Taiwan. The dispute erupted after Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi told lawmakers that a Chinese attack on Taiwan, threatening Japan's survival, could trigger a military response. This marks a departure from past administrations, which carefully avoided public discussion of such scenarios to prevent Beijing's ire. In response, China urged its citizens to halt travel to Japan, prompting Tokyo to act swiftly. Masaki Kanai, a senior foreign ministry official, arrived in Beijing Monday to meet his Chinese counterpart, Liu Jinsong, aiming to reassure China that Japan's security policy remains unchanged and to urge restraint in actions that could harm bilateral ties. Taiwan's proximity to Japan, roughly 110 kilometers from Yonaguni, the country's westernmost island, underscores Tokyo's strategic concern. These waters are crucial for Japan's energy shipments, and the nation hosts the largest concentration of U.S. military forces outside the United States. Japan's chief cabinet secretary emphasized that multiple channels of communication remain open, while urging Beijing to align travel advisories with efforts to foster mutually beneficial relations. Yet, China has not signaled willingness to meet Takaichi during the upcoming G20 summit in South Africa. Instead, Beijing demands a retraction of what it calls wrongful remarks, framing the comments as provocative and inconsistent with maintaining regional peace and stability. The tensions have rippled beyond diplomacy into both domestic politics and regional perception. Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te, described Beijing's moves as a multifaceted attack on Japan, calling on the international community to observe closely and urging China to act as a responsible global power. Analysts warn that the situation could persist for months, suggesting that Beijing's calls for retraction are more about exerting pressure than seeking a resolution. Economic consequences are also emerging. Tourism-dependent sectors in Japan are already feeling the impact, as cautionary travel advisories and political rhetoric threaten a repeat of visitor declines experienced in previous disputes over the East China Sea islands, highlighting the complex interplay of security, diplomacy, and economics in the region. The diplomatic row escalated sharply after Takaichi's November 7th remarks, which followed a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, where both sides agreed to pursue stable ties. Beijing responded aggressively, with the Chinese consul general in Osaka issuing inflammatory remarks online that were later deleted, prompting Japan to summon China's ambassador in protest. The situation intensified when China formally summoned Japan's ambassador for the first time in over 2 years to deliver a strong protest. Beijing has repeatedly warned Japan of potential military consequences, casting doubt on Tokyo's security posture and highlighting past taboos around its non-nuclear principles. The dispute is unfolding against a backdrop of provocative actions in the East China Sea, including Chinese Coast Guard vessels entering contested waters near the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands and drone flights near Japanese territory. Recent days have seen a dramatic rise in military posturing. Japan scrambled fighter jets after China flew a drone between Taiwan and Yonaguni, while Chinese Coast Guard ships patrolled near the contested East China Sea islands. Japan's Coast Guard reported driving the vessels away, but the incidents underscore the precarious nature of the region's security environment. Analysts note that such maneuvers are designed to test Japan's response and signal China's willingness to assert its claims aggressively. Meanwhile, U.S. Ambassador to Japan, George Glass, has criticized China's rhetoric, calling for a focus on diplomacy and de-escalation. These developments highlight the delicate balance of military vigilance and diplomatic dialogue in preventing an unintended crisis. Public rhetoric has intensified the dispute, with state-linked Chinese media criticizing Takaichi's comments as strategic recklessness and deliberate provocation. The language used has fueled nationalist sentiment on both sides, complicating efforts for calm. Economically, Japan faces immediate consequences, particularly in tourism. A decline in Chinese visitors could mirror the roughly 25% drop seen during the 2012 island dispute. with analysts warning of a potential dampening effect exceeding half of Japan's annual growth. Stocks in tourism-sensitive sectors already reflect these concerns, with department stores like Isetan Mitsukoshi falling over 11% and Japan Airlines seeing a nearly 4% decline. The dispute illustrates how geopolitical tension can quickly impact economic stability, especially diplomatic efforts continue in parallel with military vigilance. Masaki Kanai's discussions in Beijing are intended to reinforce Japan's commitment to strategic stability and urge China to take measured steps. While Beijing refuses to meet Takaichi directly at the G20 summit, back-channel communications remain open. Experts suggest that Japan is attempting to maintain its regional credibility while balancing alliance obligations with the United States. Analysts like Kenji Minamura argue that Beijing is unlikely to back down, using the situation to exert pressure. Japan, meanwhile, must navigate a delicate path, affirming its defensive posture without provoking further escalation, maintaining open channels for dialogue, and mitigating potential economic fallout. The broader context of Japan-China-Taiwan relations adds layers of complexity. Historical sensitivities, territorial disputes over the Senkaku-Diaoyu Islands, and questions about nuclear and conventional capabilities all amplify tension. Japan's reassessment of its three non-nuclear principles, coupled with Beijing's warnings of a crushing military defeat, highlights how security doctrines can shift rapidly in response to geopolitical stress. The presence of U.S. military forces in Japan and energy supply vulnerabilities further intensify the stakes. Observers caution that missteps could trigger a regional crisis, emphasizing the need for cautious diplomacy, clear communication, and crisis management protocols to prevent escalation while maintaining national security. International observers are closely watching the situation, aware that regional stability in East Asia affects global markets and security dynamics. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te's warnings about China's multifaceted attack on Japan have drawn international attention, reinforcing the interconnected nature of the dispute. Economists warn that a prolonged standoff could hurt trade, tourism, and foreign investment, potentially sending ripple effects through global supply chains. Strategists argue that Japan must balance deterrence with diplomacy, leveraging alliances without triggering unnecessary confrontation. Meanwhile, the messaging from both Tokyo and Beijing reflects a carefully calibrated effort to project strength, demonstrating how modern diplomacy blends public communication with strategic signaling. As tensions continue, the situation underscores the fragile equilibrium in East Asia. Japan is actively seeking to de-escalate the row with China, emphasizing dialogue, regional stability, and economic cooperation. Yet the challenge remains. Beijing shows little willingness to soften its stance, while domestic pressures in both countries amplify nationalist rhetoric. The coming weeks, including discussions around the G20 summit, will be critical in determining whether diplomacy can prevail or whether military and economic pressure points escalate further. Japan's careful balancing act, maintaining defensive credibility, protecting economic interests, and fostering international support, illustrates the intricate interplay of security, diplomacy, and domestic politics in one of the world's most strategically sensitive regions.